Welcome to the World Have Your Say podcast. Thanks very much for downloading it. I'm Rebecca Kesby. I was presenting tonight's programme.
I'm Fiona Crack, one of the producers on the team.
And Fiona, in fact, tonight's programme was all down to you, really, wasn't it? You fixed our main guest.
Yes, I certainly did. One of my jobs is to keep an eye on people coming through the UK who can be very interesting and different guests for all our programmes. And Oxford University is one of the UK's famous universities and often has very interesting debates. And so I found out they were having one of these later on today, and one of their guests was very, very interesting, and so I invited him to the programme.
It was Walid Shoebat, and he's written several books. He's a very controversial character because he's a self-confessed former terrorist. He's now moved away from violence, and he's also moved away from the Islamic faith, which he held so strongly as a younger man. He's now a Christian, and he argues against Islamic fundamentalism, and he has some quite extreme views. But tonight's programme, he was taking questions from the audience.
Yes, and a lot of the audience wanted to question him on this, and we had the phones were really just chock-a-block with people who wanted to talk to him. And, I mean, the first half of the programme, we did do a lot on Islam because that seemed to be a lot of the main questions that people wanted to ask. And towards the end of the programme, we did kind of cover more ground, I think.
We did. He was very candid about his life as a former terrorist, and he was very honest about that. The whole programme was pretty interesting, but if you are short for time, the second half probably was the best bit if you wanted to fast forward to that, although I think you might enjoy the whole programme. But anyway, we'll leave you with it. Thanks very much for downloading it, and we'll hopefully speak to you again in the same format another time.
We've had the news from the BBC. Now it's our turn. Call us on country code 44 20 70 83 72 72. Welcome to World Have Your Say.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Kesby. Thanks for joining us. On the programme today for the whole hour, Walid Shoebat. He describes himself as a former terrorist, and he claims to have participated in acts of terror in the Middle East, and he says he planned further attacks in the United States. Once a member of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, he's now changed his views dramatically, arguing that the Israeli-Arab conflict is not about geography, but about Jew hatred. He's written several books, including Why We Want to Kill You and Why I Left Jihad. Among his most controversial views is the claim that Islam has one goal, and it is to overthrow all Western cultures. He's with us, he's live, he's going to be taking your questions and comments.
Hi, I'm Claudia with your messages and emails. Anthony in California says, how do you stop terrorists? And Nora, also in California, asks, why is Islam any more dangerous than Christianity?
The blog address is worldhaveyoursay.com.
If you don't want to make an international call, text us on country code 44 77 86 20 60 80 and put call me in your message.
Welcome to the programme, and let me just remind everyone, today's programme is not about debating the rights and wrongs of Islam or any other religion for that matter. It's an opportunity to talk to a man who describes himself as a former terrorist. You can ask him whatever you like, what motivated him into terrorist activities, what acts he was actually involved in, and what changed his mind. Walid Shoebat is with us on the line from Oxford, where later he's going to be taking part in a debate at the Oxford University Union. Claudia's here with your posts and emails, and the BBC's Magdi Abdul Hadi, our Arab Affairs analyst, is sitting in on the conversation as well. Walid, thanks so much for joining us. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get straight on with the calls. We've got lots coming in. Dave is on the line from Ohio. Dave.
Hi, Walid. Greetings from Akron, Ohio, where it's very cold here. I wanted to congratulate you on finding a new path of peace. And I guess my question to you would be, what actually changed your mind about Islam and caused you to want to walk away from it?
Well, in a simple answer, Islam is cavalry. The Bible is Calvary. The Prophet of Islam clearly stated, I have been ordered to fight all nations till everyone says there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. So it is cavalry, and no scholar can deny that Islam did spread all throughout North Africa, even Eastern Europe, even Spain, through cavalry, not through Calvary and not through a cross. So that's the difference. What I found out in the Bible is basically that I needed to offer my body as a living sacrifice, not as a dead sacrifice. When I began to review 9/11, I began to realize it wasn't the 17 hijackers that were the martyrs, but it was the firemen who went to save lives. So the preciousness of life is very much emphasized in the Bible, to save lives.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So just to be clear then, Walid, you've now embraced Christianity, have you? You've
Yes.
completely turned your back on all aspects of Islam.
Absolutely.
Okay, Susan is on the line. Susan, in the Netherlands.
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. It's an interesting turning point that you took. Was there any one defining moment that made you change your views because of the background that you had?
Yes. Growing up as a Palestinian, it's always been taught in our schools. The Holocaust never happened, or the Holocaust is something that was the works of Adolf Hitler, who was a Christian, and this is something that is a plan by the Zionists in order to establish the state of Israel. We never, in the Palestinian areas, we never went to Yad Vashem, we never went to the Holocaust museums, we never took any history regarding the Jewish existence or connection to the land we call Israel. So you can imagine, from kindergarten all the way to high school. From kindergarten we sang the song Arabs are beloved and Jews are dogs. By the time I reached high school, the emphasis on martyrdom, in which the preacher would say, Ma hiya amanikum, what are your desires? And the response of the crowd will be, Al-mawtu fi sabilillah, to die in the cause of Allah. The changing moment, of course, reading the Bible. I began to read the Bible and began to recognize the Holocaust was a reality. By the time I watched footage and re-examined the Holocaust, I began to ask myself, why were we lied to?
Well, lad, what made you want to pick up the Bible in the first place?
It was a challenge from my wife. Of course, every Muslim male, you have always, in the typical marriages of Muslims with non-Muslims, it's always the male being the Muslim, and the counterpart is a Christian Jew if it's a different religion. Of course, it's a duty of every man to convert his wife to Islam. My wife was Catholic. I told her that she needs to become a Muslim. She asked me questions. She said, why should I become a Muslim? I said, well, the Bible has been corrupted. You know, virtually all Muslims believe the Bible has been changed. So she said, well, where are the corruptions? I said, well, I do not know, really. I never really studied the Bible. And she said, do you always make claims of things you never studied? Well, if man was smart, woman is smarter. I began to look into the text and began to be fascinated with much of the text, especially the words of Jesus, offer your body as a living sacrifice, not as a dead sacrifice.
Let me ask you this question, Walid. We're going to come on to more callers, obviously, throughout the programme, but many people listening, many Muslims listening, are going to say, well, you seem to have studied the Bible very well, but did you study the Quran very well? Because your interpretation of it, many people are going to say they just don't see that when they read the Quran.
Well, of course, I grew up in the West Bank, very heavy study on the Quran and the Hadith, although I'm rusty a bit on the Quran these days because I've been focusing my time on studying the Bible. Of course, all the way to high school, I studied the Quran. I memorized portions of the Quran as well. I can recite portions of the Quran, prayed 5 times a day. My father taught Islamic studies. So my teacher, Naim Ayyad, graduated from Al-Azhar University of Egypt. These are not small teachers. And the focus of martyrdom by Sheikh Naim Ayyad and Al-Azhar University basically permeated our culture and our schools. So you can't say that, look, a lot of Muslims argue and say, well, you're not a scholar on Islam. You're not a scholar on the Quran. How could you comment on Islam and the Quran? Well, the counter answer to that is, does every Muslim have to be a scholar on Islam or the Quran in order to be a Muslim?
Okay, Walid, I think it's important for us to just kind of establish where you're coming from. I wonder if you'd mind describing, you say you've been very candid about being involved in acts of terror. Would you mind telling us what kind of terror activities you were involved in?
I planted a bomb on the roof of a bank in Laumi Israel, Bank Laumi Israel in Bethlehem. It exploded at 6 p.m. I was supposed to be planting it at 6 p.m. Had I followed my instructions, I would have went as a suicide bomber. Later on, I came to the States. I was imprisoned, of course, before that, and that's where my recruitment began. My recruiter, Mahmoud al-Mughrabi, his cousin Dalal al-Mughrabi, which she killed a whole busload of Israelis, came to the States later on, and in the States, I was involved in the PLO. Later on, disenfranchised with the PLO. I wanted something more puritanical. I saw the Lebanese not getting not getting along with Palestinians, and Jordanians didn't like us for Black September and what have you. I joined the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, my mentor, his name is Jamal Saeed. It is said he's a colleague of Abdullah Azzam, the godfather of Al-Qaeda. And he's still free in Bridgeview, Illinois. He was raising funds for Hamas. And you can see in my website the kind of activities, Shoebat.com at the bottom, the kind of activities the Muslim communities used to be involved in. You can see for sure that what I'm saying here is a reality.
Okay, Walid Shoebat is with us for the whole programme. You can put your questions directly to him. The blog address, worldhaveyoursay.com. The text is 447786 20 60 80. Aisha's on the line from Mozambique. Aisha, what do you want to ask Walid?
Assalamu alaikum and good evening to Walid.
Good evening.
What I would like to know, let me start from saying the following. I have been listening to what you've been saying on tonight's show. I did some research as much as I could before formulating my question to you, and I read what is on the BBC's site. And it seems to me that every time you have taken a stance, a religious point of view, or you've taken a worldview, a way to look at things, you have taken the extreme end of that choice, of that stand. Do you not think that you are a bit extreme in your nature, that you have not been able to find the middle path in Islam and not really the middle path in Christianity also? As when you were a Muslim, and the things that you used to do were very, very extreme and towards one end. And now as a Christian, you're doing the exact same thing, but from a different camp. Would you not say that your nature is very extremist?
Well, look. I can quote Winston Churchill for you, who stated, "How dreadful are the curses which Mohammedanism lays on its votaires, besides the fanatical frenzy, which is as dangerous in a man as a hydrophobia." So you can say that Winston Churchill was an Islamophobe and an extremist as well. Many opinions like that about Islam.
Are you an extremist, though? Do you have? Is Aisha right in saying that you go from one extreme to the other?
Not at all. To shed the mantle of terrorism and to adapt the mantle of peace is not extremist.
But your views are quite extreme, aren't they? You're saying that by its very nature, Islam cannot operate within a Western society.
Well, Islam cannot operate within Western society because Islam is a constitution. Islam is a form of government. Islam is Sharia law, the amputation of the right hand and the left foot and all these things. The woman inherits half the man. Those are extreme laws, extreme constitution that does not fit Western culture. So to say that we as Westerners need to protect ourselves from Sharia laws which could infiltrate in our society is not extreme whatsoever. To protect ourselves from this kind of views and from this kind of system, Sharia is, you can go to 50-some Muslim countries and you can experience Sharia as a Westerner and come tell me that it's not extreme.
Aisha?
Yes. Okay, I heard his points of view, and for the sake of propriety, I will not go into an argument. I will pose another question. I want to know what is his opinion of his critics who regard his story and his activities as dubious and claim that he has got very little credibility in his actions.
There has been reports. The New York Times had an article calling me a fraud with no substance in the article itself. You don't see anything from Chris Hedges. It doesn't show any piece of evidence regarding this claim. You have a report that went to the Jerusalem Post that claimed that I never planted a bomb. Remember, I was here in your country. I was here in Great Britain. I debated Chadouri, who was head of Al-Muhajirun. He said on the air that I was a Lebanese phalangist. Now, that was proven false because my family testified that I was a Palestinian. In fact, how did they find me had they not known Shoebat clan is a big clan back in Bethlehem? They went down there and began to examine. My cousins who testified against me said I was in prison. In fact, one of my cousins that testified against me, Kamal Yunus, and his brother was Jawad Yunus. He was an attorney for Abu Zubaydah, the right hand of Osama bin Laden. And I showed letters of him even signing, congratulating Hassan Nasrallah for bombing Israel, a cousin who did lots of financial terrorism, all these, my cousin as a martyr, my other cousin who went a suicide martyr. You can, even with click, so you can go and read it for yourself. Did you know there is no rebuttal to my rebuttal so far? You can see it on the website.
Okay, Walid, we've got Ajmal on the line now in the UK. He's the spokesman for the Islamic Society of Britain. Welcome to the programme, Ajmal. What do you make of all this?
Hi, I'm just a bit concerned that your guest is confusing his personal experience and projecting it as experience of the Muslims across the globe. He may have had personally bad experience to do with the faith, and some people may have treated him badly. I'm a Muslim, I live in Britain, and I have lived here all my life. I'm an imam. I have no reason to ever think there is a conflict between what I consider Islamic values and predominantly good, decent Western values. So to say it's not compatible, I think he's confusing the issue. He's throwing lots and lots of issues such as Sharia, this, that, and the other, without qualifying or giving them fair justice or fair discussion.
Are you saying Sharia is not a law? Are you saying Sharia is not a constitution? Are you saying
Sharia is an evolving human endeavor.
If it is evolving...
Listen for a second. Based on Quranic principles and the judgments of the Prophet, but most importantly, based on using of intelligence, maslaha, benefit and mafsada, which is harm.
So when the Prophet said, when the Prophet said, whoever leaves his faith of Islam, kill him.
No, he never.
He never said that?
This is the problem with people like you who have not studied Sharia well. You've cherry-picked words of Sharia and you've used it as though it is something that you can beat the rest of the world with. Prophet never said that. In fact, in his entire life, he never put anyone to death because of them leaving the faith.
Well, let me give you the reference then. Sahih Bukhari, volume 9, book 87,
oh, well,
number
hang on
6878.
Walid, we did say we haven't really got the capacity to go into throwing scriptures at each other. I think it would confuse very many people.
This is the problem with such a debate. A person like him, another wanting to grab the media headline and become the hero, savior of the Muslim world, because he thinks somehow Islam is incompatible to the West. Well, first thing first, how much Islam does he know, and how much West does he know?
Well, it seems, sir, you don't know
hang
anything
on,
about
Islam. Let Walid come back there.
It seems that he doesn't know anything about Islam if he says that the Prophet never said, whoever leaves his faith, kill him. I gave the reference of Bukhari in volume 9, book 87, number 6878.
Well, but you're going back to references there again, Walid, and I don't know that that's helpful to the actual debate. Ajmal's got a point there, hasn't he? There are hundreds of thousands of millions of Muslims.
How is that a point?
Happily living in Western cultures, involved at every level of society.
If they're so happy living in Western cultures, how come they chased your police a few weeks ago? The police were running away. How come you have 10,000 terror attacks in the world?
Walid, please.
No.
Do not use isolated examples. I'll give you an example of...
Well, let me give you an example. Magdi Abdul Hadi, our Arab Affairs analyst, is with us. Magdi, what do you make of this debate?
Well, I think it's a very interesting debate, and there is just... I think the Rashid is bringing together so many controversial issues. One is the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and that has its own parameters where Islam or religion is often used to justify one action or the other. So just let us park this one to the side and concentrate on the debate around Islam. As we just heard from the gentleman calling from Britain, that there is not one agreed opinion on what is true Islam, and the views aired now by Khalid seem to be very close to the extremist views that use whatever the Prophet said or didn't say to justify killing those who disagree with him, while there are so many other Muslims who dispute that this hadith is accurate, let alone the fact, even if it were accurate, it is not suitable in modern times to use it. There is a broad distinction between an Islamic tradition, and I'm not saying that this Islamic tradition represents a minority, but there is a broad distinction between a literalist Islamic tradition, of which Khalid's views are a good example of, and there is those who emphasize the values of Islam: tolerance, living together, pragmatic approach to life, etc., etc. And I think that is quite important to emphasize in this debate.
Okay,
Tolerance,
if you've just joined us, you're with World Have Your Say. Lively debate tonight.
Wait
You
a
can
minute
text
here.
us. Coming to you in a moment there, Walid. Text us on 447786 20 60 80. Lots coming in. Anthony in California got a very quick question for you here, Walid. He's saying, you're being so open with all this. Are you ever scared of someone killing you now for your very open views?
You see, your very question proves my point. Why would you ask such a question? Are you
It's
not
Anthony's
scared for
question.
your
Anthony's
life?
in California.
Obviously, your question states that there should be fear for dying for leaving Islam, which proves my point.
Or just fear for having very radical or very open views. It doesn't really matter which.
Look, you could condemn Christianity and the Bible and everything else. You never fear your life. You would never ask such a question from Richard Dawkins. Did you ask Richard Dawkins, are you afraid for your life for criticizing the Bible?
This is Anthony's question from California, and I'm going to ask you again. Are you scared?
Well, we're all going to die. We can either die for something or die of something. So it doesn't really matter what happens to me. We know Christianity is a faith that won through our blood, not through the sword, through the cross, and not through jihad, through Calvary and not through cavalry.
Okay, let's get some more of your comments. Claudia.
Sahar has emailed us and says, I'm a Palestinian Muslim. I always had Christian friends. We live and study together. We never felt they were different. We always knew that the Holocaust happened. Jennifer in New York asks, how can Islamic extremists hate me? What were you told to make you believe this? And Dotan in Nigeria asks, well, what do terrorists actually feel like moments before they go on missions?
That's quite a good question, isn't it? And it's not very often that we have an opportunity to ask it. What's your answer, Walid?
What a terrorist goes through is a bliss. It's really a time that you think you're going to meet Allah, because the Prophet of Islam said, by the shedding of the martyr's blood, by the first drop of his blood, not only he will enter paradise, but he becomes an intercessor for 70 members of his or her family. Muslims deny that Islam has intercession. My cousin Ra'id, of course, he went to Ben Yehuda Street to plant a bomb. He was killed by the Israelis, and of course my Aunt Fatima had a wedding festivity. The jubilance of the martyr's wedding it engulfs the entire society. You can see pictures of my cousin on the walls, like Rambo. The Friday prayer worship is about my cousin and things like that. So it is a moment of bliss. In fact, Adil al-Sadiq, who's a psychiatrist in Egypt, was asked a question about the martyr. Now, this is a psychiatrist. He was the head of the Department of Psychiatry. What was his answer? He says, the martyr, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Now he is in the adobe of Allah. Now he becomes an intercessor. He's got the virgins and all this kind of things. Now, is the head of the psychiatric department of Egypt gone nuts himself? Or is he just a Muslim fundamentalist?
Magdi.
Can I just ask you, don't you think you take specific examples and you try to generalize this on more than 1 billion Muslims? Aren't you sort of somehow...
Did you ever hear me say 1 billion?
Well, you say Muslims are. Islam is, and we've established that there is not one version of Islam.
Well, I don't know where you got
if Islam is different, as practiced in Saudi Arabia, is different from Islam in Egypt, in Morocco, in Turkey, in Malaysia, Indonesia, and from Islam as practiced in the West. Can you concede that? Islam as practiced in these different societies.
Is Sharia. Saudi Arabia, if it practices over 90% of Sharia, Egypt exercises less than 50% of Sharia. It doesn't mean there's a difference in the Sharia as much as you are saying. It depends on how much Sharia they practice. Look,
would you concede that there are different interpretations of Sharia?
Okay.
In every single Muslim country that adapted Sharia, not one of them is signatory to the Hague Convention regarding the abduction of women and children. In fact, my mother remained 35 years in the Middle East, stuck in a Muslim society, because there is no signatory Muslim country to the Hague Convention regarding the abduction of women and children. And if indeed Islam offers equality, when was the last time you can show me a Muslim girl marrying a Christian or Jewish boy? It's always vice versa. Where is the equality in Islam?
Okay, Walid Shoebat is with us for the whole hour. You can put your questions to him on text 447786 20 60 80. Dan's on the line. We're going to have to come to you after the news now, Dan. Stay tuned. We've got the latest world update of global news coming up in just a moment.
You heard the news from the BBC. Now it's your turn. Call us on country code 44 2070, 83 72 72. Welcome to World Have You Say.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Kesby. Thanks for joining us. On the programme today, we're putting your questions to Walid Shoebat. He describes himself as a former terrorist. He's already said that he's participated in acts of terror in the Middle East. He says he's planned further attacks in the United States. He says that Islam cannot operate in a Western country. He's with us live and he's taking your questions and comments.
Hi, I'm Claudia with your messages and emails. Andrew in Australia asks, what is the future for Western Islamic relations? And Jessica in Freetown has texted. She says, how can you generalise about Islam? Sufis, Shias and Sunnis don't agree on ways of worship, let alone their hatred of the West.
The blog address is worldhaveyoursay.com.
If you don't want to make an international call, text your point to country code 447786206080 and put call me in your message.
Okay, we've heard from Mozambique, the UK. We're about to go to Kampala in Uganda, but first Dan is on the line from the United States. Dan.
Hi, Walid. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Walid, what can we do to better balance the needs for our security against personal freedom?
That's a very good question, because as Westerners, Islam and Islamic fundamentalism is not really our problem. We didn't create it. What we need to do is, first of all, dismantle the jihadist ideology. Jihadist ideology creates a lot of confidence. We appease the Islamist. We give concessions to Islamists. We give them Gaza. We give them, weapons. We fought against the communists, so we aided the Mujahideen. What that created was more confidence.
That's a long time ago, though, Walid, isn't it? I mean, in the modern day.
Well, it happened. Condoleezza Rice did the same thing. When Israel wanted to crush Hezbollah, her exact words were, we need to have cessation of hostilities, as hostilities exist on both sides. So Hezbollah declared victory. More confidence build-up. We need to destroy the jihadist God of Islam, this jihadist ideology that God is creating us this confidence. It's like the stock market. Stock market goes up from confidence and it goes down from confidence. Kemal Ataturk removed Sharia and we had peaceful Islamic world. We had peaceful Turkey. It wasn't by establishing Sharia, yet in the West we are establishing more Sharia and we're going the reverse. We need to do the opposite and do what Kemal Ataturk did, and that is do away with Sharia.
Okay, Walid, we're getting lots of comments from Muslims, as you might expect, around the world. Robert is in Kampala. Robert, thanks for coming on the programme. What's your message or question for Walid?
Yeah, the question I have for you, or the comment is that I think he was confused when he was becoming a terrorist, and he's still confused when he's out of terrorism. The one question I always ask my friends who espouse Bin Laden-like views is, if a male terrorist gets 70 virgins, what does the female one get?
What was the question?
It's a difficult line there, Robert. I'm sorry about that. It's a difficult line to Uganda. I think we can say you are a Muslim yourself. I think you're from a family of Christians, so you've converted to Islam. And I understand you have a background in law and the legal world.
Yes, I do.
You're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer. What I was saying is that Islam is essentially a very personal religion. The law you espouse in your personal life should not affect others if they do not believe as you do believe. If that's to do with marriage, even if it's to do with succession, even if it is to do, until you enter into the criminal realm, which is essentially the state which enforces criminal law. But your personal feelings, your personal goals are only enforceable against you if you choose to do it.
So you believe in amputating the right hand of a thief?
OK, I think it's a difficult line for Robert there. He's struggling against technology, really, on that line from Kampala. But I think what Robert was saying, he's a practising lawyer, and he's also a practising Muslim, and he says that Sharia law is about your own personal life, your family life, and not about the legal institutions within your country. Let me just remind everyone, today's programme is not about debating the rights and the wrongs of Islam or any other religion. It's an opportunity to ask Walid, who describes himself as a former terrorist, anything you want to about what motivated him also and what changed his mind.
There is no real scholar in the world that would define Sharia as our gentleman caller here defined it.
Let's get some more comments now. Claudia.
Dagoretti in Kenya says, it sounds to me like your guest is courting controversy and publicity to generate sales of his books. Askenasti posts on our blog, I lived alongside Arabs for many years. Sure, they are very serious about their faith, but virtually all I knew were happy to be with others. James from Kenya emailed to ask, what do you think is the best way to rehabilitate Guantanamo Bay detainees and alter any intentions they might harbour against the West?
OK, that's a good question, Wally.
Well, the first question, if she lives in peace amongst Muslims and this kind of thing, this is fine and dandy, but yet we must notice that 20% of the Middle East was Christian. Today we have only 2%. What happened to them if they're living in peace? What happened to the Coptic Christians in Egypt? Are they living in peace? After Mumbai, we had a pogrom in Egypt, 20,000 Egyptians attacking churches. No one's talking about these. We're only talking about Walid Shoebat and how he's trying to sell books, so on and so forth, even though I've never even advertised a single book on this program. So they always attack the messenger. What happened to the Christian communities in Iraq even, the persecution of the Syrian Christians? What happened in the Damour massacre in Lebanon? Come on, let's get with the reality here. The persecution of Christians is never talked about in the media, on the airwaves here in the West. The only thing that I can see them talking about is Israel bombing Gaza and how many Palestinian casualties there is.
Well, I guess it depends what television programmes you watch and what kind of news you expose yourself to. We've got this text just come in, actually, Walid, on a similar topic to the one you've just been talking about. Can one person, there's no name on this text, it's anonymous, can one make a living being a full-time anti-Islam speaker, author and debater? Are you making a living, and is that your plan? Are you?
From 1993 all the way till about 5 years ago, I have torn every check that was given to me in donations. I worked as a computer programmer. In fact, my first 2 books, Dear Muslim, Let Me Tell You Why I Believed, is online for free, no charge. And my second book, Israel and the World's Mock Trial, I wrote them free of charge for people to download. When I left my programming job, my programming position, do you expect me just to live on the side of the street with a can, or do you not expect me to get paid for speaking engagements?
Walid, just out of interest, what do your family make of your views now? Do they feel a bit betrayed that you've turned against the religion of your forefathers?
I wrote a letter to an attorney in Jerusalem, and he said, not only will you lose your child now is a Muslim, he is no longer your child according to Sharia court. I lost all my property and all my land. My family gave me one single phone call. You have a right to come to the Sharia court in Bethlehem and to denounce your Christian faith and declare the Shahadatan. I declare there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. There is your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion. In fact, it's my family becomes they become your worst enemy. They become your worst nightmare. It is the duty of the brother to kill me. It is a duty of, so I had to even hide from my own brother, my own family. You can understand what it's like to leave Islam. In fact, you asked the question, you're not afraid for your life. You'd have never asked that question unless you known yourself that Muslims do kill converts.
Eileen is on the line from Arizona.
Hello, Mr. Shoebat. I'm honestly curious to know your answer to this question. After you've caused the death of innocent bystanders...
I did not kill anybody.
...and heard of their loved ones' anguish, how do you sleep at night? If you planted a bomb, you could have killed somebody. How would you sleep at night knowing the disruption and pain that you have caused to their families?
Ma'am, it's what we do in life after we've realized our mistakes. In other words, confession is the beginning of healing. Once you confess, you can heal. The problem with our Middle Eastern culture and the Muslim world is the lack of confession and the interest in attacking the messenger instead of attacking the ones who propagate hatred.
This is a similar question, actually, from Kampala. Martha says, how did you feel when carrying out those acts of terrorism, and what conviction did make you turn your back on it?
To be honest with you, when I planted the bomb and it exploded, I thought I killed somebody, and I didn't feel good at all. I didn't sleep for 3 days, couldn't eat and drink for 3 days, and then when I realized there was no death or no casualties, I was so happy. It's like taking a millstone off my back.
Eileen, have you got anything to say to that?
I guess I'm a failed terrorist.
Well, I'm very happy that you're a failed terrorist, and I wish you success as a reformer. It is a puzzle to me how people can take lives so casually and then expect to go to heaven.
Yeah, look, the biggest thing in my life that I began to fix was the relationship with my mother. My mother was held for 35 years in the West Bank, couldn't escape to the United States of America. How could she escape? She needs to convince her kids to help her escape, and her kids would turn her in, because that's the first thing I would do, is turn my mother in.
Really?
As a matter of fact, she did escape once, and we forced her back. And I realized, 1994, I rescued my mother back to her country, back to seeing her parents. Imagine, 35 years in exile. If you've seen the movie Not Without My Daughter, her story is infinitesimal to my mother's story. In fact, it's her story that needs to be told. The treatment of women in the Middle East, especially if they're married to a Muslim and they're Christian and they want to hold to their faith. My mother could never go to a church. My mother could not open the Bible and study it. My mother was persecuted in her faith. And that's something that is abhorrent.
Let me bring you this email from Munira. She says, I'm a Muslim living very happily in the US and the UK before this. I'd just like to comment to your guest today. He seems to be here just to argue. I think he'd argue even with me if I were on the same side. I'm sorry for all that he's been through in his life, but I think that he's disowned Islam and he should just let it be. Good for him that he's found his calling in life while he is in it. But why is he barraging my faith? Christianity is about acceptance and respect for other religions. Why doesn't he practice it?
Islam is, if it's a religion, she is absolutely right. We're not talking about Buddhism. We're talking about a constitution. We're talking about a Sharia. We're talking about a form of government. The Prophet of Islam says, I have been ordered to fight till all nations say there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger.
Okay, well, we said we'd keep off the quoting of scripture, Walid, so I think we ought to. Just to remind you, you're listening to World Have Your Say.
What happened to the freedom of speech?
With us for the whole hour is Walid Shoebat. He's on the line. He's taking your questions. He's written several books, including Why We Want to Kill You and Why I Left Jihad. He is a self-proclaimed former terrorist. He's now turned his back on violence and he's embraced Christianity, but he's very critical of the Islamic religion. You can contact him on the blog worldhaveyoursay.com or text 447786206080. Put your question directly to him.
Amin in Nigeria texted and says Walid was a confused Muslim and a terrorist. He is now a confused Christian. Franklin in Freetown says the gentleman moved from extreme Islam to extreme Christianity. Maybe he just can't help himself being himself, a natural extremist. But Julius from Monrovia asks, if Muhammad were alive today, how would he view the world being plagued by terrorism in the name of Allah?
If he is alive today, he would still commence to gather and win the rest of the world to Dar al-Islam, because the Islamic world breaks down the world into two parts, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, the house of war and the house of Islam. In fact, there is no scholar in the world that would deny that Islam spread through North Africa and even Eastern Europe, Egypt, all these countries, Turkey, all these countries were Christian lands. They were converted through the sword. So in all these emails you're getting and all this denial should not be addressed to me, but it should be addressed to Sheikh Qaradawi, who himself made the statements that Islam will conquer Rome. So I don't understand why they attack the messenger instead of the fundamentalists themselves. I'm fighting the fundamentalists, so they should be on my side unless they themselves are fundamentalists who are giving these emails.
Nangak is on the line from Abuja in Nigeria. Thanks for calling in, Nangak. What's your question for Walid? Have we got you? Nangak?
Hello?
Hi,
yes, please.
Welcome. You're with
Yeah.
World Have You Say. Thanks for calling in. What's your
Yeah,
question for Walid? He's here.
Okay, he said that the major intent of Islam is to overthrow the Western culture, Western civilization, right?
Yes.
What I want to find out is, considering the fact that there are over 1 billion Muslims on earth, what do you suggest we do? What would he want us to do in order to live, especially those of us who are not Muslim?
Well, what we need to do, the Islamic problems we have in the Middle East and the Muslim world is the Muslim problem. It's not a Western problem. We need to stop this interjection into Western society. We see it happening. We see demonstrations and terrorism, 7/7, 9/11, all these things. We need to protect our borders. This is not an issue. Every Westerner thinks that it is our problem to solve the problem of Islam. It is our problem to moderate Islam. Moderating Islam is something that the Muslim world has to do. Al-Azhar University still teaches Sharia, still teaches the amputation of hands, still even supports suicide bombing, so long it happens in Israel. So this is Al-Azhar University problem. This is a Saudi Arabian problem. What we need to do is stop our dependency on oil. And number two is what we need to do is we need to be proud about our Western culture. It seems to me that the problem here in the West, everywhere I go, they lost connection to their Judeo-Christian heritage in Britain. Multiculturalism is the theme of the day.
What's wrong with that?
Well, you have to have your own culture. You have to have
Why? Why can't you be a melting pot of cultures?
Well, you've seen the result of this melting pot.
New York? Very big melting pot. People manage to get along with each other?
I have no problem with melting pot. I'm not saying about melting pot with Buddhist, Muslims, and things living together. But remember, the Islamists bring their Sharia with them, and they pressure these countries here. You know, Siddiqui established Sharia courts in Great Britain, splitting the legal system in half.
But we've just heard, Walid, from a lawyer in Kampala who is a practicing Muslim, and he's a lawyer operating under Ugandan law, which has nothing to do with Sharia law, and he says he's got no problem with that.
Yes, in some societies they don't establish. Look, all Muslim countries that don't establish Sharia law fully seems to have no problems, as much as problems as other countries.
Nengak's trying to get in from Nigeria.
Yes. What I want to ask, though I don't know if Walid will be able to answer that, is the other callers seem to say that there are various kinds of Muslims. They said that the Muslims do not seem to agree on some issues like that. What I want to ask is, are they accepting that there are versions of Islam that some are actually bent on overthrowing Western cultures? Are there radical Muslims, moderate Muslims like that?
Okay.
Is there any harmful version of Islam out there?
Okay, I think I can get the gist of that, Nengak. It's a bad line, but I think you're saying that there are many factions of Islam, and some are more moderate, and then you have people with extreme views. Walid, we've got this question here from Edward, who's in Freetown. He says, Walid, have you gone to Israel since you converted to Christianity, and do you fear that you'll be prosecuted for the crimes you committed?
Well, I'm not sure if I get persecuted because, remember, my other cousins were released by Israel. I had a cousin who was sentenced to life imprisonment. Terrorism is a revolving door in Israel. Israel releases more terrorists than any other country in the world.
Would you be prepared to stand trial and do time for the crimes that you committed?
It's amazing you asked that question.
Why?
Because I can go to Israel, I probably wouldn't have a problem. If I go to Palestine, I'll probably die within 5 minutes. So it's not the crime.
Would you? I mean, you're saying that you wanted to confess, and that that's the path to healing. Would you be prepared to go to Israel, admit what you did, tell them exactly the details that you did, and stand trial for it?
Yes, I will. No problem. If Israel invites me to stand trial, I will go. See, the issue here is when I used to be a terrorist, the airwaves called us freedom fighters. Now that I'm fighting terrorism, the airwaves are calling me Islamophobic, bigoted, fundamentalist, divisive, racist, Bible-thumping Christian. Is that fair?
Okay, that's a question for us, I guess. And Scott on the blog has a similar one. He says, Mr. Shoebat, I've heard a lot of hostility being directed at you because of your story. I'd like to hear why you think that is, why people are so hostile.
Because many of the Islamists in this country are claiming to be moderate. Look, to denounce terrorism is an act, not just a verb. You don't see in the Muslim world, the Pope made a statement and he said Islam must never be propagated through violence. Millions of Muslims rioted in the streets. How dare the Pope say what he said? Islam is peace. Does he not know that Islam is peace? He was facing the same thing I'm facing right now. Yet they expressed this peacefulness through sheer violence. In other words, you better stop criticizing Islam and saying that Islam is violent, because if you don't stop, we will kill you.
Let me just remind everybody how to get in touch with us if you want to be part of the conversation. You can post on the blog, worldhaveyoursay.com, or you can send us a text, 447786206080. And if you write in there, call me, we will try and get to you. Jody is in Virginia. Hi, Jody. Thanks for being on the programme. What's your question?
Hi. I'm very interested as this has all developed, and I especially caught your repeated comments, sir, about the difference between cavalry and Calvary. Christianity, and I, of course, live in a Christian-dominated country. Christianity, by its nature, has, from one crusade after another, done its bit in terms of using violence. What occurred to me as I was listening to you, I can turn on Fox News, which is an ultra-conservative news station in the United States, and I hear the same thing there that I'm hearing from you. And
no Christians today support the Crusades. Absolutely none.
Sure.
No one wants to go back to the Catholic world of the... So I don't see why they keep reiterating the same thing. The Crusaders... There's no Crusaders today, ma'am.
Okay, you can't be selective in your choice of examples.
You're the one who was selective. You selected the Crusades.
No.
Oh, you want to argue, please.
No.
We're having a conversation,
Who's
Walid.
talking about the Crusades?
All right, well, let's just hang on a sec there, Walid. Jody, do you want to come in just to give us your point?
Yes. My point is this. I'm very disappointed because I was hoping to really learn something, and selective choice of information to drive home one narrow view instead of trying to bring understanding.
You're talking about
not
Fox
a helpful
News.
Thing. And to point fingers and say you're shooting the messenger, nobody's shooting anybody. We're trying to learn, and you're attacking us when we have legitimate questions, and that's very
Look, the United States is doing a lot better than the United Kingdom. And that is because of our mentality over there has not really succumbed to losing our culture and our Judeo-Christian values. So we're doing better than you, despite how much you criticize and how much you say the Crusaders. So
no.
Which model works?
One example. Every people who have wanted to expand themselves use military power, and they justify it however they will. You can't choose some examples from Islam and not use the same examples.
10,000 terror acts. 10,000 terror acts by Islamists. And you telling me this is a minority example?
Okay, Jody, are you saying that it's not about religion, it's politics at the end of the day? Is that basically what you're saying?
That's basically what I'm saying.
Well, that's what I'm saying too. Islam is politics, man.
Okay, let's hear from James. He's on the line from London. Thanks for joining us, James. What's your point?
Hi, my question is two questions, really. The first one is, what does he make of the Archbishop of Canterbury's recent comment about the fact that we should accommodate some parts of Sharia into the British Constitution? And then two, what does he hope to achieve by the end of this program?
Let's deal with question one first, Walid. Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yes, I think it's foolishness because you are not giving the message. You're talking about integration, and you said, what's wrong with the melting pot? Well, that's exactly the question I'm asking. What is wrong with the melting pot, with Muslims coming here and using the laws of the West and adapting to the laws of the West? People who don't like West, they can
Is
live
he saying
east.
that the Archbishop is foolish?
I'm sorry?
Are you saying that the Archbishop of Canterbury is stupid or foolish for making that statement?
Affirmative.
Huh?
Yes,
he
affirmative.
is a Christian. He is a Christian. He probably knows the Bible more than you do.
See, at least
And
us
you are
Christians
telling him
can
that he is
criticize
stupid.
other Christians. We can
Sorry?
criticize other Christians, can't we?
James?
Hi. I'm sorry, what's the
Yeah,
question?
Walid's saying, well, you know, he's got a right to an opinion and he disagrees with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and as a Christian, that's okay.
I can call him
that's
stupid,
fine.
can't I?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. He's got his own opinion. But what I wanted to know is that what does he hope to achieve at the end of the program?
Which is almost upon us, I must just say. So what do you want to achieve there, Walid, by speaking out in this way?
I currently live in the United States of America. I definitely do not want to live in Great Britain, where the danger is a much bigger threat. I definitely don't want to live in France, where the riotings, or Australia. I think we need to preserve our Western heritage. I think the Western heritage has something to offer. Britons should look at their Judeo-Christian heritage. It is something to be proud about.
Okay, Walid Shoebat, thank you so much for fielding those questions. Thanks for being with us. Thank you for taking part and sending your questions. The debate does go on at worldhaveyoursay.com, and we'll be back tomorrow with more views from around the world. You've been listening to World Have Your Say. Thanks very much for your company.